Well, kind of made a big mistake here in the live stream in that I did not set it to being public. Oops. Well, this is kind of why we're doing this and testing it out. I see there's nobody here. Anyways, if anybody was wanting to see the live stream and showed up, sorry, but something went wrong. See, the problem is I can't see it from your perspective. What I should do is always bring it up on my phone. Anyways, okay. So maybe write something in the chat if you were trying to watch the live stream and couldn't see it. Unfortunately, I made a little mistake. This is my first time doing this, and I'm trying to figure out. There's this um, Streamlabs software is so complicated, and so unfortunately, I screwed up the first part of it. I was actually on time. I just didn't make this live stream public. So, oh well. I'll learn that and know it for next time. There was multiple things going on. Anyways, so folks, I already started talking about conspiracies, and maybe what I'm going to do is just go back to um, going back to some points that I was discussing, which are like basically like these are some ideas that I've thought of as ways to debunk conspiracy theories, and when you're confronting somebody who's purveying a conspiracy theories, these are things to think about, or when you hear a conspiracy theory. So the first is like motive and means. So to debunk a conspiracy theory, you ask for those, like who are they blaming for the conspiracy, and what is that person or group's supposed motivation? So they have to have like this conspiracy this conspiracy has to have a motivation, and then also ask like what are the means? Do they have the means to carry out what's being claimed? Does anyone have the means to do what's being claimed? And for example, like I met this flat earther at Florida Permaculture Convergence last year, and he seemed like an interesting guy. He wanted to recycle plastics into this kind of new product. I can't remember what it was, but it seemed like a good idea. But then later on, I heard him talking with some other people, and he was talking about flat Earth, and I thought he was joking around about it at first. But then after a couple minutes, I realized he was actually serious about this, and so anyways, I got into an argument with him, and was debating like his all the points that he was bringing up about like flat Earth theory. Um, and then I asked like, well, what would be the motivation of somebody doing this? And he said the NASA budget. And NASA is a relatively small agency in the U.S. government, has a $24 billion budget, which only part of which goes to space exploration. And I guess his idea was that like, oh, they want to justify a budget for space exploration so they can launch rockets out into space, and in order to do that, the Earth has to be round. Um, so it's always like it's assumed that there are people at the top that know the truth, such as those at NASA, but they're maintaining the conspiracy so that they can get some benefit from it, and it just doesn't make any sense. Like really whether the earth is round or flat, I would think if the earth was flat, an organization like NASA would want to explore it anyways. They would want to have a budget that involves exploring it in whatever way they could. So it doesn't make any sense. Also, NASA has only been around since 1958, and it's only in the US. And people around the world know that the earth is a sphere, and so why would like this relatively small agency be like they somehow are maintaining this vast conspiracy that involves billions of people on earth, and over hundreds if not thousands of years humans have thought that the earth was round. um, and so the motivation just seems kind of ridiculous, and then the means is like how much money would it cost to maintain this conspiracy, to keep all the people that are in the know that the earth is really flat? How would they be able to maintain that secret over hundreds thousands of years? And it would just take trillions or quadrillions of dollars um, to maintain uh, that vast conspiracy. So it just, there's not motivation. The motivation is weak, and I don't know what other flat earthers say is the motivation. I think I have heard the NASA budget mentioned before, but it's just seems so unrealistic. Another example is like weather manipulation. So there are conspiracy theorists like Marjorie Taylor Greene will say that cloud seeding can somehow control hurricanes. But this is completely false. Like cloud seeding does exist, um, but all you can really do with cloud seeding is potentially cause a little more rain to fall where it otherwise would would have. Like basically, you need the right conditions, you need the right weather conditions to seed clouds, and then you just get rain. You don't have the ability to control weather with cloud seeding. We're changing the weather with our activities, such as with climate change, and by cutting down forests and paving huge parts of the planet, or by causing wildflowers, but we can't intentionally control the weather on any scale, uh, any significant scale. And as far as motivation, people are claiming all kinds of motivations, such as like the Democrats are controlling the weather and creating hurricanes that target red states. Well, for one thing, most red states have like as much as like 40% Democrats. So why would you target so many people in your own party? Also, like hurricanes happen in the South. They usually start in the Caribbean and they kind of move north. Uh, and then they inevitably will hit the southern states, and the southern states are conservative red states. So that's just kind of where the hurricanes happen and always have. So this idea that like Democrats would have the motivation and the means to control the weather and create these hurricanes and then send them into red states to cause havoc just is unbelievably ridiculous. So, um, and then remember the Confederacy was called the South, so like obviously the southern states. But when disasters like this happen in blue states like California, the right is still making up conspiracy theories for why the Democrats are doing this to their own states. So it's always like the same enemy is the perpetrator coming and going, and it just kind of makes it clear that the ones with the motivation are the ones spreading the conspiracy theories, and that motivation is to demonize their enemy, the left. Um, Sometimes the motivation might seem possible, such as with some conspiracy theories around the California fires. Some people are saying that it's an effort to destroy huge areas and make them available for a land grab. And no doubt disaster capitalism exists, and no doubt wealthy real estate titans will swoop in after most of these disasters and snap up the land to develop it and make billions. But sometimes the logic doesn't really fit the motivation. These are already rich people and some of them wealthy celebrities. So why would they be the ones that the land grabbers would want to? Wouldn't they be the ones the land grabbers would want to serve and help? And wouldn't it be more likely for the rich to want to steal land from poor people? And that explanation and motivation would work much better for like Hurricane Katrina, because a lot of poor people lost their homes during Hurricane Katrina. But even if the motivation seems logical, the means still doesn't exist to control the weather on such a large scale. And even if you can, theorize that the motivation might exist, that doesn't mean it's real, like that's happening. Um, so my own conspiracy theory around the California fires is that Trump supporters and other right wingers went around lighting fires so they'd be able to go on a tirade blaming the Democratic leadership of California for the fires, which is what they've been doing pretty much ever since these fires got started. So they obviously have a motivation to do that and the means to start fires, because it doesn't take much to start a fire. But in reality, these fires were only made possible by really unique weather conditions. And I don't think Republicans are smart enough to have predicted them and what impact like arson would have had. They weren't just like, oh, if we light these fires in this spot, it's going to burn down this huge part of, LA, and those Democrats will really be mad. So I just debunked my own conspiracy theory. Um, the other thing is that a lot of the 40% of Californians that are Republican live in these rich neighborhoods. So why would you burn down your people that vote with you? I don't know. So what is the motivation? Next like thing to think about is like what is the motivation of the purveyors of the conspiracy? It's usually like anti-government, and there are definitely good reasons to be skeptical of the government and critical of the government. Um, but other motivations are bashing an opposing political group or any other enemy. So um, these things you can usually tell, like the previous examples that I just mentioned. The right wing wants to demonize the left, but for like 9/11, there was a conspiracy theory that this was an inside job done by the Bush administration, and it's sort of justified the invasions that happened after and the you know basically consumption of a lot of weapons, and purchase of a lot of weapons and money that went to military contractors. And there is no doubt that there was sort of a motivation to go to war after 9/11 happened. Um, and there was a direct connection made between the conspiracy theory about the Bush administration flying planes into the World Trade Center and the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. But the conspiracy theory just seems much less plausible than the actual motivation of Islamic extremists to commit terrorist acts in the US. Like, the US does so many horrible things around the world that we get blowback, and that's just going to happen. And it seems like very plausible. The actual explanation seems very plausible. But that sort of conspiracy theory was obviously something coming from people on the left, or I don't know who else, but like would have to be people on the left to demonize the Bush administration. There's plenty of criticisms that you can make of the Bush administration and their, the trumped up weapons of mass destruction to justify going into Iraq. But those things were not predicted as conspiracy theories. They were found out after the fact. So many conspiracy theorists are uneducated, and instead of educating themselves about something they don't know anything about, they try to act like they know something by making it up or repeating some conspiracy theory, usually anti-government, because it makes them seem like they know something about a topic that they know nothing about. So they just feel kind of left out. They also they don't have the education, they don't want to do the work involved in finding out how things work. Like, they don't want to understand meteorology and how weather happens. They don't want to know that, like, you got a high pressure system here and a low pressure system here, and it causes wind to go from high to low. They don't want to know how that works or learn about it. They just want to be like, oh, I have this enemy that I want to demonize, and this conspiracy theory that somebody just gave me makes me sound like I know about this topic, and it also, in the process, demonizes somebody that I want to make people think is horrible. There's also a desire in spreading a conspiracy theory or believing one to feel like you have some special knowledge that others don't have, and you're fighting a secret enemy others don't know is ruining their lives. So you have this like secret knowledge. You like are so smart that you know more than everyone else does because you know this secret information about like what's really behind things. And so that's definitely a motivation. So an example, in the California fires again, they had a very obvious explanation, but wildly impossible conspiracy theories were invented to try to explain them. But because most of these people couldn't grasp the concepts of weather conditions that actually led to the fires. Um, they just, made stuff up or clung to these ideas. So like misleading videos have fueled false claims that directed energy weapons, often referred to as DEWs, ignited the flames. The conspiracy theory suggests that governments or secret organizations use lasers or microwave systems to ignite fires. Um, and experts have repeatedly debunked these claims, attributing irregular burn patterns to natural factors like wind, terrain, and vegetation. There's actually a video on YouTube that was made in, I think, 1961 about this exact part of California and LA by the LA Fire Department. It was like a little documentary educational video, and you can find it on YouTube. And it perfectly describes exactly what happened in the California fires. And they even had like video of these crazy flames that people now are trying to say is an explanation. The explanation is some like special weather manipulation or something. And the video is kind of interesting because it's very scientific, and it goes through explaining like what happened like with water supply, why they aren't able to get water in time to these certain areas. And it was just like, wow, this actually perfectly explained what just happened. And this was 63 years ago or something. So it's amazing. Look for it on YouTube if you can find it. And another thing, like in 2018, noted, congressional dolt Marjorie Taylor Greene claimed that the fires then were caused by Jewish space lasers. There were even anti-conspiracy theories this time, with people claiming the government could have stopped the fires by manipulating the weather, but didn't do it. So the government gets blamed coming and going. First, they started the fires, and then they didn't do enough with their special powers that don't exist to stop the fires. Oh, we're getting some comments. The Domestead says, you have to think of conspiracy theories as tyrant insurance. If you cannot look at both the offerings this last election, there's your sign. Middle time is pretty important. Okay, I'm not sure I can. Yeah. Yeah, I think those are good comments. So getting back to it, I'm sorry, it's hard for me to. I'm gonna make this smaller so that I can kind of look at the chat at the same time as I'm talking. That's kind of a better idea, better way of doing it. But yeah, thanks for watching and joining in the chat. Where was I? I can't remember. Yeah, okay. So the right wing has had it out for California forever, even though California is like 40% Republican. Conspiracies blame the government for using weapons to ignite the fires. Not surprisingly, every time there are large wildfires, by the way, that are being fueled by climate change factors, conspiracies are spread about them. But people who are uneducated look at videos of the wildfires and invent their own explanations for these things they don't understand, because they just don't understand and don't want to do the work required to find out what the actual explanation is. They don't want to talk to the experts who deal with these things all the time and actually know what they're talking about, which is like that video from 1961 that I was talking about. They even dismiss these experts as part of the conspiracy. This is not what a smart person seeking the truth would do, but conspiracy theorists can cling to whatever explanation their brains can easily understand, especially if it demonizes someone they don't like or they disagree with. Oh yeah, Occam's razor. I'm actually going to talk about that. That's one of the points that I that I'm going to bring up here. So another example is the HARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. So people make up the craziest impossible explanations for what the HARP array is doing. They don't know the slightest thing about physics or what is physically possible in the universe, but they have a desire to demonize the government. So they make up all these special superpowers that the HARP array is using for all kinds of nefarious purposes, which, like, these are just supernatural. They just can't happen. That claim that Lahaina fires was lazy. Oh, I don't know. I mean, there definitely were very unique conditions that led to the Lahaina fires going out of control. So I don't know. I haven't heard any of the conspiracy theories. What what kind of lasers? Like, who's got lasers? Is what I wonder. Um, I mean, much more obvious explanation would be somebody just like lit a match and threw it on the ground. Like, that's much easier to do than lasers. Or like power lines, something like that is a very likely explanation for what happened in California and a lot of California fires. Um, so nobody will ever make up a conspiracy theory about positive and happy events, just the ones that people have strong negative emotions about. For example, like the election denial, Trump supporters hated the fact that they lost the 2020 election. So instead of facing reality, they decided to deny reality, and Trump gave them a reason to deny it by spreading lies about the election. So, and then Hurricane Helene was incredibly devastating and emotionally traumatizing, as were these California wildfires. And so there's all kinds of conspiracy theories that have just cropped up around those events. And it should be pointed out, though, that most of those inventing and spreading the conspiracy theories about these events didn't personally experience them in any way. So it was traumatizing for other people, and they saw firsthand what was going on. But there are people from across the country just trying to inject their opinions in there by and their bias by inventing conspiracy theories to push an agenda. So yeah, those people just saw an opportunity to fuel their lies and demonize their enemies. Um, Also, it's more likely that people will make up conspiracy theories about topics that are prominent in the news. So no one's going to make up a conspiracy theory about some unknown event. They aren't. They're going to make one about something that's like a topic that's salient and will have legs, such as like drones appearing in the night sky or a devastating hurricane. It's also true that conspiracies about major news events, celebrities, or political figures are more likely to gain traction because more people know about them and will want to spread them. Political groups, especially those on the right, ramp up their propaganda machine to capitalize on disasters prominent in the media so they can convince more unthinking, uneducated people to agree with them and join their side to fight their political enemies, mostly the parts of the government that are populist and help most average people. So like their enemies are those parts of the government that are helping people, such as like these first responders and others trying to help people after these disasters. Um, so they want to demonize immigrants in all kinds of ways. So they spread conspiracy theories that like Haitians are eating cats and dogs. Trump spread this lie himself, and all of his cult members have believed it. So, um, it's just uh, these things, you know, take hold in the media and then they're spread like crazy. But like when they're coming straight from the top, from a person that already has a lot of eyes on them, like that also uh, allows them to spread really fast. So conspiracy theories tend to validate the prejudice and established opinions of the people who spread them. So in a 2017 review of existing research on the psychological appeals of conspiracy theories, Researchers found these theories promised to fulfill fundamental epistemic, existential, and social needs of believers. So this is mostly for the unthinking people because skeptics, will be skeptical of any unfounded, ridiculous conspiracy theory, whether it targets an enemy or not. So people that are able to just like look at the facts and without the bias of like and with understanding that they could possibly have their own bias about something, if they just look at these facts, um, they're much more likely to come to the conclusion that like and debunk the conspiracy theory and not go along with it. Whereas people that don't think and are not skeptical are likely to just embrace any conspiracy theory that goes along with what they already want to be true. So most conspiracy theories can easily be analyzed for political bias, and the conspiracy theory be debunked simply for the blatant political motivation of the spreader of the conspiracy theory. But it's also their prejudice that motivates them to spread lies. They don't like the government because they've been fed anti-government lies in the past. So when another anti-government lie comes to them, they're that much quicker to accept and spread it because it supports their confirmation bias. And, you know, I'm not, our government has so many evil parts of it. And parts of our government might think that they're doing something that's beneficial to people in this country or to the world, but not in my opinion. And I'm not anti-government. I'm not blindly anti-government. I know that there are horrible things that our government does, but there are also aspects of our government and governments around the world that can be very positive. And um, and I want to preserve those kinds of government, that kind of government, and those parts of our government. Um, so I can understand why people are anti-government, and also like secret, CIA, NSA, all kinds of organizations in our government like that that have like secret missions and do things um, clandestinely. Like those are horrible things, and that only makes the government, people have worse opinions of the government. But that doesn't mean that you just cling to any conspiracy theory because you hate the government in some way. You have to think about like, does it make sense? And the HARP project is a good example of that. It's like the U.S. Navy originated the HARP project, but they wanted to test like radio transmission in the ionosphere. That was the motivation, which I'm sure they weren't going to do great things with that. I mean, they were probably going to use it for nefarious purposes, but like the HARP project was just like one array. We know what its limited abilities are based on like what is possible and what is known. And then the Navy gave it up and handed it over to the University of Alaska. And like, what motivation would the University of Alaska have to be doing all these things like controlling the weather and all that stuff, that like all these supernatural powers that are attributed to the HARP project. Solar will. Just looking at the comments here. So yeah, like getting back to this valid sort of like conspiracy theories that validate the prejudice of people. So like anti-government prejudice. But intelligent, skeptical people will be far more hesitant to accept lies just because they support their inherent biases. For instance, after the 2024 election, there wasn't a mass movement of election denial on the left because overall they thought the election was probably fair. They didn't immediately try to tear down the institutions of democracy because the election didn't go their way, as the right and Republicans did after Trump's 2020 loss. The left clearly didn't want Trump to win and were incredibly unhappy with the results, me among them, but they didn't deny reality because they wanted reality to go a different way. You don't just do that. if you're like a thinking person. On the other hand, when Trump won the election this time around, the vast majority of Republicans found no problems with the election process. So miraculous, eh? They won, no problems with the election. They lost, oh, all these problems, unfair, like it was corrupt and manipulated and all this stuff. And it's like, geez, like, could you be more obvious about your motivation? And this difference shows like the obvious difference between the two sides of the political spectrum. The left is much more likely to accept empirical evidence that goes against their beliefs and desires, while the right will only accept it if it goes along with their beliefs and desires. By and large. I mean, obviously there are exceptions, but just by and large. So, much like religious beliefs, conspiracy theories are the craziest possible scenarios and explanations for reality, such that they're incredibly unbelievable, and yet people still believe them. It almost seems like the crazier they are, the more people believe in them. And I talked about HARP, the high frequency auroral something radio program. Anyways, I don't always remember the acronym, what the acronym stands for. So people claim this facility that basically sends up radio waves that excite the atmosphere to cause small scale aurora is used in weather modification and even mind control. And so I talked about it being created by the Navy, and then they handed it off to the University of Alaska. And I guess maybe because it's former connection to the US military, these conspiracy theories have started, and they're anti-government, of course. These theories also claim there are dozens of facilities around the world when there's only one, and the technology just doesn't exist to manipulate the weather with radio waves or in any significant way with any kind of tech. And tech certainly doesn't exist that can control minds, except for the cell phones everyone carries around with them everywhere and are unable to pry their eyes away from, even to pay attention to other people that they're in a conversation with, or the road that's in front of them. Yet no one is spreading vast conspiracy theories about cell phones. This is another example of why the right, who are the ones who buy into these conspiracy theories more, don't invent conspiracy theories about things they agree with. Which brings us to another point. People don't like to invent conspiracy or spread conspiracy theories about anything in their lives that they really like. They aren't making up conspiracy theories that will demonize anything they want to use on a daily basis in their lives. They'd never make up a conspiracy theory that would require them to give up their smartphones or the cars or all the luxury items they'd love to use in their daily lives. And this lays bare like the blatant motivation behind the conspiracy theories they accept and spread. And on top of this, they'll reject any scientific explanation that casts shadow on anything they want to have access to in their lives. So believing in climate change caused by burning fossil fuel isn't acceptable because it requires personal action and sacrifice of things they love, burning fossil fuel. But trying to explain weather events that are actually the result of climate change by blaming them on the government or their political enemies is perfectly acceptable, no matter how contrived or impossible the explanations are that lead them back to blaming the government. And yeah, the government hasn't taken any real action to stop climate change, and that's because of the very clear conspiracy that is the corporate control of our government through campaign contributions and lobbying. And this is not a conspiracy theory because it's a known reality of our political system. Most of our politicians spend most of their days fundraising and meeting with corporations and industries who buy influence on our government. That's the way things work. And earlier I talked about like there's conspiracies and then there's conspiracy theories, and what this live stream is about is conspiracy theories. Conspiracies are real things that were discovered after the fact or that are revealed. So, like the Tuskegee experiment, when the US government was um, doing medical tests, experiments basically on black communities in the South by infecting them with syphilis. And they did this over 40 years until it was discovered in the early 70s in 1972. And so this was a real conspiracy. But nobody before then was making up a conspiracy theory about this exact thing and saying, oh, I think the government is doing this testing and like experiments on black communities in the South. This was revealed after the fact, and it was a conspiracy, but it was revealed. And so conspiracy theories are just like surmised. They're things that people think are happening, but there's not really evidence of. They're based on false evidence mostly. And I already talked about like motivation and means. So Occam's razor, which was mentioned in the chat, just looking at the chat a little bit. I'm not in on this little discussion here. But anyways, Occam's razor was mentioned in the chat earlier, or the law of parsimony. Also, like in Sherlock Holmes, I love Sherlock Holmes and read all those stories many, many times over. When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. So conspiracy theories are mostly impossible and rarely just improbable. But Occam's razor states that the simplest explanation is more likely to be true, and no conspiracy theories seem to be simple. They're always elaborate and impossible explanations, yet people without any critical thinking skills cling to them. Like Occam's razor has its faults because many supernatural explanations for natural phenomena seem simpler on the surface than the scientific explanations. For instance, using God to explain the creation of everything in the universe seems simple until you start looking into how the God was supposed to be created. And evolution by natural selection is a simple explanation for what actually happens in nature to change species over time, but the actual processes affecting evolution are incredibly complex. So I think Occam's razor can work for critically thinking your way out of most conspiracy theory rabbit holes, because it will bring you to a simpler explanation. Sorry, just want to see if I'm getting feedback on the chat. Most conspiracy theories are easily debunked, but debunking them doesn't stop them from spreading. So some posts that reach millions of people on TikTok falsely, this is like an example, like some posts that reach millions of people on TikTok falsely claim the wildfires in California were sparked to destroy evidence in the sex trafficking case against Sean Diddy Combs, falsely claiming his mansion was consumed in flames. In reality, Combs' mansion remains intact and outside the evacuation zone. So it wasn't even burned down. And his home was raided last March by federal agents who seized evidence on the property. And the home was listed for sale in September. So basically, there's no evidence in there, and burning it down wouldn't have accomplished anything. But that doesn't stop this conspiracy theory about somebody burning down, starting these fires so that they could burn down his home and hide the evidence. Yeah, it just seems kind of out there. And it would have taken these conspiracy theories like a couple of seconds and an internet search to debunk the claims of the theory, but they lack the intelligence or the motivation to do so. So some of the popular conspiracy theories recent, I mean, there's all kinds of them. Pizzagate, Jewish space lasers causing fires, QAnon, the entire organization, has all kinds of conspiracy theories. They're the ones who spread the Pizzagate one. The Pizzagate conspiracy theory started on a 4chan message board So that's a great source of information for facts. Um, you can always trust what somebody posts on a random chat thread. So QAnon believed that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump. They blamed left wing groups for the insurrection they carried out, that QAnon and other Trump supporters carried out on the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Uh, they believed and spread false conspiracy theories that there was a pedophilia ring being run out of a pizzeria in Washington, D.C. The conspiracy theory was started on 4chan, yeah. So there's like three basic beliefs that QAnon people believe: that the government, media, and financial worlds in the US are controlled by a group of Satan worshipping cannibalistic pedophiles who run a global child sex trafficking operation and conspired against Donald Trump. So, like, could you have a more like dramatic way of demonizing your enemies than to call them Satan worshipping cannibalistic pedophiles who run a global child sex trafficking operation? That's like, I don't think you could think of anything worse to say about someone to vilify them. They also believe there's a storm coming soon that will sweep away, and you'll find that a lot in right-wing conspiracies against the left, is they use these kind of extreme accusations, unfounded accusations. So there's a storm coming soon that will sweep away the elites in power and restore the rightful leaders. I guess the storm didn't come, but there was an election and it restored their rightful cult leader. So I don't know. That prediction didn't come true either, but at least they got what they wanted. Definitely proves them wrong. Because things have gotten so far off track, I'm sure the thing is, like with a lot of stuff like religion, conspiracy theories, once something happens to disprove what they thought was going to happen, they just sort of shift their conspiracy theory or their beliefs to fit in whatever happened, to integrate it. The third point about QAnon is because things have gotten so far off track, true American patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country. So this is interesting that they believe this, and they said they needed to resort to violence to save the country, but then they're blaming all the violent January 6th terrorism that happened and destruction of the Capitol. They're blaming that on BLM or Antifa. So like they say that they should try to do things to restore the rightful leader, Donald Trump. But then when they did that, they said they blamed it on someone else. Interesting. So, yeah. The entire QAnon movement was basically about finding their enemy, the Democrats and liberal Hollywood actors, and smearing them with the worst possible slander they could think of to demonize them. Anyways, that's what's always funny is that every day there are multitudes of church leaders in the US being arrested for child molestation, and yet QAnon doesn't seem to care about these real criminals. I wonder why they would try to misdirect blame for these real crimes to their political enemies, Maybe because they like religion and they want to protect the real child molesters. So that's a real motivation. In this way, we can also see, obviously, the desire to demonize an enemy and how that feeds a conspiracy theory. So other conspiracy theories, HARP, I talked about that. The moon landing being faked. Another thing, I guess the motivation for that was the space race with the Soviet Union. So there's a motivation. Seems a little ridiculous, and also like there's so much evidence that the technology existed to be able to do that, and obviously the people who went there say it's ridiculous. So it's just yeah, and you can actually like look with a telescope at the moon and see the landing sites. So JFK assassination, there's all kinds of conspiracies about that. World Trade Center and 9/11. There were all kinds of pandemic, COVID conspiracy theories. That was just an incredible mess. Anti vax conspiracy theories. Many times the activities of the government or corporations fuel the conspiracy theories because they really do evil things. Like big pharma is evil, and I would rather they not be in charge of producing vaccines because they're only motivated by profit and people hate them. So they don't have a duty to society, and they're already corporations that people hate. So if you have them make something that's really important in society, no one's going to trust it. And although I think we should have had vaccines made by the government, there's plenty of anti-government people who would be skeptical of that. But at least the government still has aspects of it that are trying to serve society and are dedicated to the betterment of society. And we get those benefits all the time in our lives. We get benefits of having a government. And I'd argue that, like I said earlier, that all its goals are for the betterment of society. It's just, it has pretty screwed up ideas of what that means sometimes. And they're distorted by corporate influence. So the reality is that conspiracy theories are being supersized in their influence and spread by social media and the internet. What we need is people who can think critically and not just accept and repeat any conspiracy they hear just because it confirms their biases. We need critical thinking skills that will lead us to question what we're being told and examine the evidence, the motive, and the means for supposed conspiracy, and the motive of the person spreading the conspiracy or starting it. So we've got some discussion going on. I don't know if anybody has any questions. You might wonder what happened. Sorry I wasn't on time. I was actually on time, but I am still trying to figure out this live stream program. And so I didn't set it to be public. When I went live, it was unlisted, and so nobody could find it. And so once I was like, why is nobody here? Really sorry about that. I won't make that mistake again. There was just like a lot of things I was trying to pull together. And one thing that you all might have missed, I was trying to do a little bit of stuff with, not having this be full screen. And early on I talked about, let me see, yeah, it's just this trickiness of this program. Here we've got some flat earth stuff that I was talking about earlier. And let me see, I'm going to try to change this over to capture a different thing here. Yeah. So this was an image I was talking about early in the live stream. I was having an argument with this guy, this flat earther at the Florida Permaculture Convergence, and he was showing me images similar to this of the Earth. I don't know if they were these exact images. I've outlined the shape of Africa here just so it stands out a lot more, but you can kind of see the difference in the size of these. And this is what he pointed to. He's like, look at this different size of this continent. This must be fake, because they didn't get it right. Why does it look like this? Why do these look different? And at the time, like, I looked it up after. At the time I didn't have my phone and I couldn't look stuff up on the internet. And so I was like, I don't know enough about these pictures to say why they look different, but I'm sure there's a good explanation. He didn't know either, and his explanation was because it's a vast conspiracy to make people think that the Earth is round when it's actually flat. And these pictures were taken from space, from different spacecraft. I think the first one on the left was taken in 2015 by some craft that was orbiting the moon, and you can kind of see um, at the bottom. I'm not actually sure where this cursor ends up when I don't know if it's showing up when I do this. Um, but this is, you can see the moon, surface of the moon here, and it's taken from the moon. So this is like 382,000 kilometers away from the Earth. I've made them look exactly the same size in this image, but they're actually taken from different distances. So this one on the right was taken from a little bit less than 30,000 kilometers away. So like the one on the left is like more than 10 times as far away. And the reason that they look different is because you have a different perspective, even for a round like a sphere, depending on how close you are to it. This is true of anything, that your perspective, things look different depending on how far away you are from them. They both look round, they both look like they're the same size, but the continents look different on them. And that's just because of the relative difference of your perspective, the distance that the pictures were taken from. So that pretty much explains it. And this guy, the conspiracy theorist, the flat earther, just didn't want to bother to look into the actual explanation of why that would have been, you know. So that's what I explained earlier. Also, let me see if I switch this around. You're saying my stream is lame because I talk about things I have no idea about? Like what? Here's like a one possible diagram of a flat Earth model. Wish I could get this to be more in the middle. I'm not sure. Oh, I think it's just because it's over on the side, right? Yeah, it got stretched out somehow. Let's try to get this moved around. So anyways, here it is. Here's this. Oops. Let's go back to here. But what's interesting about this is that this is from this flat Earth model is from Answers in Genesis, a website called Answers in Genesis. A flat Earth prediction falls flat. So these people, Answers in Genesis, believe that the Earth is like 5,000 years old, and they're still debunking the flat Earth model, which I think is kind of interesting. But anyways, here's, let me move this over, make sure that we can see what's going on with this. I need to make this whole thing smaller. It somehow got supersized. Actually, I kind of want it to be bigger in here. Anyways, this this shows you sort of the difference when I was talking about the Earth and the different distances from the Earth that those pictures were taken. So we've got Mount Rushmore as it looks from kind of far away. We've got a little bit closer. We've got right underneath it, and you can see how things look different. They're distorted in different ways. Here's the Eiffel Tower. Look at how incredibly distorted it looks, and this part looks so much bigger than this part does that's far away. And when we're right underneath it, this is what it looks like. Here's a better example, because this is the globe. This is a globe. And this is a great example that corresponds to those pictures that I showed of the Earth from space. Look at how small North America is compared to the round shape of the Earth. And you can see quite a bit of South America here. But now we go up to this perspective, which is taken from much closer. And you could conceivably have zoomed out on this or just cut out the round shape of the Earth and then put these next to each other. And look at how big North America is on this on the shape of the round shape of the Earth, and you can barely see any of South America over here. So like that's just the difference in perspective um, that's created by how far away you are from something. So that's that. Okay, I'm going off the side here. There we go. Okay. Sorry, it's not that I'm ignoring you. I just um, it's hard to focus on the on the live stream and what I'm saying. Q and Anons don't believe in violence. Well, I don't know about that. Everything you say is wrong, whoever you are, hardcore sustainable. Can land on the moon. Weather modification should not be an issue. Really? You mean like it should be possible to modify the weather because we can land on the moon? I don't think those are. You believe in adaptation and evolution. Yes, I do. It's not really a belief. It's a thing that's there's tons of evidence for. Homestead. Weather modification is bragged about in China. LOL. Well, cloud seeding is real. Yes, but cloud seeding, as I said earlier, you can't control weather with cloud seeding. You can seed clouds, but you have to have like a cloud that's a certain type that because basically cloud seeding just sort of provides a um, basically a catalyst for like condensation to happen or like ice formation, and so then the condensation happens and raindrops fall out of a gas state that clouds are made of, and that's how it happens. But like you can't control um, weather with cloud seeding. You can make rainfall sometimes if the conditions are right. Like the people were saying in the California fires, well, why can't they just seed the clouds? There were no clouds. Like the reason why the fires went crazy is because they had been in a drought for like 10 months. It had not rained for a really long time. Everything was dry as a bone, perfect conditions for, and like normally they should have been getting I think it's rain in the wintertime, and they were not getting that. And that's usually you have the Santa Ana winds coming down, but usually it's been raining, and so it's gotten everything. It's not as dry, and so it's not as much of a tinderbox. It's still like that whole part of California is chaparral, which is naturally fire prone. It's like the whole ecosystem is adapted to fire happening on a regular basis. And they built all these houses in there and they put in lawns and trees and stuff. And like they're in a fire prone zone. So it's like that's going to happen. And it's like it's a combination of overdevelopment, climate change, which is what caused there to be less rain. And the season of the Santa Ana winds doesn't normally overlap with the dry conditions, and it just happened to be that this happened, and so it was like these strong 100-mile-an-hour winds and parched dry environment, and so that's what caused it. I'd recommend watching that video I talked about. There's a video on YouTube from 1961 made by the LA Fire Department, and it's like they're describing exactly what just happened. They're going through everything that happened with like explaining why it's difficult to get water to certain areas because of the way that the water systems are set up. And also like which directions the fires go in certain conditions, and like why the fire goes the way that it does. It's pretty amazing, and it's all explained from 63 years ago. So it's like you can't possibly say that like the current situation is somehow, unless you think that like AI created this old like newsreel kind of thing. No, I don't think so. So at the do you believe the Earth is flat, or are you referring to something else? DW Documentaries has a good accredited film on geoengineering on YouTube. Well, I'd be interesting. I'd be interested in learning. I mean, I'm always interested in learning more about, um, you know, what's out there. But I think a lot of this stuff is pretty easy to debunk. Um, Geoengineering. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really do any good to say you don't know what you're talking about or you have no idea what you're talking about. I guess he left. John Wilson left. So you didn't hear the part where I was like, sorry, it's hard to follow the chat. I have like a certain thing that I'm trying to say, and then there's like the chat here. So, anyways, if people want to have more of a discussion or response from me in the chat, now would be the time if you want to say something. So, what is the Domestead? What's geoengineered? Like, what are they saying is geoengineered, or is it just like hypothetically we could do this? I mean, this John Wilson guy says, I mean, does he not think that one of the things that like QAnons are Trump supporters? I think that's unlikely, but pretty sure that like it's known what QAnon stands for. Anyways, I guess if nobody has anything else to ask about, sorry I wasn't like, it's not a perfect system. This is my first live stream, so hopefully I'll get better next time. I'll be able to like have more interaction because like some of the chat was kind of going on while I was going over stuff. And I think it would be better to have like a back and forth. It's a lot easier to do when you're in a room full of people, like when I'm doing a workshop or something, and people are raising their hand and asking questions. It's a little bit harder to follow the chat and respond to that. Um, who's talking about the coffee shop I worked at? You mean the bakery? Is this me? I don't know if you're talking to me. Gap Bite. I'm talking to Gap Bite. Oh yeah. Yeah, and I'd also like to do some of these live streams. I think I did a little survey last year, and people wanted to know have a live stream that was more about like um, ditching the 9 to 5 life, and I can definitely do stuff like that. I just kind of chose this one to start out with. I had a lot of material about it. Um, yeah, yeah, definitely. I'd like suggestions about the live stream chats. But yeah, the bakery, it was a cooperative bakery. There were like 7, 8 people working there in Madison, Wisconsin. And yeah, I worked there for 5 years back in my 20s. And it was great small business experience. Each of us worked most of the time on, in the bakery doing production. And then we also split up the management of the business. So we each took different areas. Like some people ordered the ingredients, Some people, like I, did the books. Um, some people did the marketing. I don't know. There's all, like, everything was divided up. And so if you worked there, you did a little bit of management and a lot of production. We made whole wheat organic breads, made granola, uh, made calzones, like frozen calzones and veggie burgers. And yeah, like sort of a green based, nut based veggie burgers in the early days of veggie burgers. And so, yeah, it was a cooperative bakery. It was a great experience. It was nice not having a boss. We had meetings together and made decisions by consensus for the business. And then, people came and went, and you could leave. If you wanted to leave, somebody else would get hired. They'd be a co-owner, and it went on for over 50 years. It was started in, I think, 1970 in Madison, and then it just went out of business like last year or the year before. So, yeah. Video idea for me: building an eco village that is not impacted by left and right political parties. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think politics are always a part of something, but our eco villages tend to be more left than anything else. But yeah, I mean, it would be nice if people didn't have politics, but that's just kind of the way things are. Like, some people are just intolerant of other things. And so that makes a lot of the, like, I think a lot of left and right agree on a lot of things. But I've been saying, like, in in elections, it seems like if we just voted on the issues, um, there would be a lot more agreement. And because, like, everybody wants to have good health care that's affordable. Um, that's not really, I feel like that goes across political spectrum. I think there are certain issues like immigration that definitely don't. Like, I think immigration is just a big hoax. It's like a right wing hoax. It's not a problem. And it's always been used to rile people up against other people. Um, and people always sort of demonize foreigners or new people that come. That's just part of being human, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, it's hard to, like, I think it would be hard to have. Oh, I guess I didn't finish talking about the election. So people vote. I think people vote similarly on issues, and they vote differently on issues than they do when they're voting for individuals. So, like, politicians, I think a lot of people vote based on culture war issues and hate, and are motivated by hate towards other groups. And um, and that's who they vote when they vote for people. Um, and so that's why I feel like Trump is somebody who, like, promotes hatred of other groups, and he demonizes groups, and he's not a president for all people in this country. Definitely, I mean, he's a fake populist, and he openly says that he hates and is against a huge portion of the population, and he doesn't care because he can still win elections. So somebody like him is a perfect example, and his whole platform was built around build the wall, intolerance of people from other countries, intolerance of gay people, LGBT community. Like, it's definitely a huge part of that culture war. And so when people vote for individual politicians, I think they vote a lot more on hatred than on issues. Like, because they vote for a politician who will, like, make their lives worse in so many ways because they're not voting on the issue, they're voting on the person. So, anyways, I don't know, do you have any suggestions for um, how you can have any situation that's not impacted by left and right political parties? I mean, in our eco village, I think I've said before, we are very similar politically overall. there's small portions of us like in our eco village that were anti-vax, and so that caused a lot of conflict during the pandemic. Um, and often it's kind of weird because you have people that can agree politically on a lot of issues, but then when you live with them, it's it can be hard to live, just as hard to live with them as it is to get along with people with different political ideologies. Um, so that's it's kind of a funny thing about, you know, you put people together in a tight knit community and then they still don't get along with each other. So maybe it's just kind of. So what do you have? Patterson Gimlin film? What is that? Brent says that. All right. Well, I guess I'm probably going to end the live stream here because I've been. Oh, acceptance and love is really is the only way. Hard to sell these days. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It's just hard to. I mean, how do you accept people who are intolerant of people? Like that's the. I mean, it's great to say acceptance and love is really the only way. It's a Bigfoot filmed in the 70s. Looks legit to me. Okay. Yeah, that's another one. I don't know if that's a conspiracy theory. That's more like a myth or a like folk uh, belief. I mean, there's so many of those throughout history. Bigfoot. I'll check it out. I feel like back in the 70s, I watched so many, in the early 80s, I watched so many things on TV like Bigfoot was the thing. everybody everybody was really into Bigfoot back in the late 70s, early 80s. So I probably saw all of those documentaries a long time ago. Um, anyways, acceptance of love really is the only way. Definitely, acceptance and love is really the only way. I mean, that's great to say, but like, what do you do if you have people in your community that don't accept and love people who are different from them just because of the color of their skin or like who they want to be in love with or um, I don't know. It's like, and I don't think intolerance of intolerance is something that's wrong. I think we have to be intolerant of intolerance. So when you can't say like, you know, you're intolerant of me because I hate these other people and I want them to die. Like that's not being intolerant of something. That's being intolerant of a behavior that is wrong. So slowly still moving towards the eco village, New Amazonia, New Eden. Nice. Is that your own eco village idea or are you talking about um, Dancing Rabbit? The Domestead, sorry. Oh, cool. New Amazonia, New Eden. Are those the names of it? Yeah, there's a couple people that I'm have been meeting with since last year here in Florida, and we're talking about trying to start something down here that would be like a retreat center um, and a food forest and kind of just a like hub for starting similar kind of communities. Um, so we've been talking about that. We've written up a business plan and we're working on a pitch deck now. It's an interesting idea. Um, and I like Dancing Rabbit a lot, but I also would like to have someplace similar to come to when I come down here. and also like be able to teach more workshops and things like that, and build like cool structures out of bamboo. And um, yeah, just because I don't like being in Missouri in the wintertime. So having something similar down here. Uh, a large subset of people today would rather live a harder life if it means a harder life for their perceived enemies as well. Yeah, that's true. It's a weird mindset. They're kind of like they'd rather own someone else and make them suffer than um, make their own lives better. So that's a huge part of it, definitely. I don't understand it. I think they just don't realize. I mean, it's interesting because I think about the farmers and the rural people where I live in Missouri continue to vote for Republicans decade after decade after decade, and their lives don't improve. Like, Republicans don't seem to have done anything for people in the country to improve their lives. Really, their lives have not gotten any better. And the same is kind of true for like um, people of color voting for Democrats. Like, I feel like Democrats haven't done anything to really address um, a lot of poverty of people of color. And so it's like, why why do people keep voting for these political parties? Like the Democrats used to also support workers, and now they're just like corporate. So um, so yeah, why do we vote against our own interests? We need more populists, like real populists, like Bernie Sanders or people like that are like true populists that are going to actually try to help people, in my opinion. Um, am I on face? Oh, you're asking, is that my name? Or I'm Dan. I don't know if that's what you were asking. Um, I do have, I'm on Facebook. Um, yeah, and I also have the Hardcore Sustainable Facebook page. I haven't considered starting anything outside of the US. Trying to think if I've visited eco villages outside the US. I don't think so. Um, the what I've always thought of, like, I've lived outside the US, and um, definitely think about it from time to time when I hear about things like, oh, there's vineyard estates in Italy that you can get for like $1 as long as you promise to like do a bunch of you know improvements to the property and invest a certain amount of money in improving the property and bringing it back into like production. Um, but those are more just like, I don't know. I don't think I'm thinking seriously about that. I'd much rather start something that's in the US, and I like Florida because it's we can have like sort of the tropical fruit aspect of it. We're trying to look in zone 10 so that we can still grow a lot of these tropical fruits. And and I also like the fact that I don't need to speak another language to um, to live there. So that's kind of where my mindset has been. We could start something, and I've heard about people starting these kind of retreat centers or that have them going. And there's one guy in Nicaragua that's been working at a retreat center. I talked to him last year, and he wants to turn it into an eco village. But it's like, you could do that, but it's just I don't want to try to start something in another country. I'd much rather, especially if it's a retreat center, I would rather have it be a place that people from the U.S. can go to, and it's in the country, and it's also warm in the winter. I don't know. That's just where I'm coming from. I've heard about other people. I've known other people that went to other eco villages outside of the U.S., and I've learned a lot about eco villages outside the U.S. Yeah, I'd love to hear about it. Definitely, I'd love to hear about your idea for a place outside the U.S. So, Yeah, I think I've seen your comments before. I don't remember what what you were commenting on, but I recognized the Domestead, your name. Have you, Gap Bite, have you visited other eco villages outside the US? Before I went to Dancing Rabbit, I visited Earth Haven briefly, and I think I've been to Eco Village at Ithaca, um, and I've been to other communities and intentional communities around the country. So, yeah, yeah, I know there's, I can't remember the name of it or where it was. It was somewhere in Europe, and I learned about it maybe like 10 years ago. And at the time, they were maybe it was in Germany, I think, and they were already at like over 120 people, and they had not been around for very long, so their population was growing fast, and it sounded like a really cool eco village. I wish I could remember the name of it. So, all right, the Domestead, yeah. Feel free to like connect with me through Facebook if you can do that, like commenting or something. I don't know. Find the Hardcore Sustainable Facebook page, and if you want to connect, we can chat. Take it easy. Okay, I think I'm gonna get going as well. But thanks for joining on this first live stream. I'll try it again and hopefully have the technical stuff down, not make the same mistake of not putting it public initially. All right, well thanks for joining me, and keep watching. I'll be posting another regular video before too long because I've already got one all ready to go. So you all have